Geometry, Notes, Section 9.2, Sine, Cosine, and Complementary Angles. Now before we get into this, let's just discuss what sine and cosine are. Sine is a word, comes from sinus, which means opening. Cosine, the co in that is short for complementary. So this is technically sine and complementary sine. So why do you think they would call it complementary sine? Let's look at some things here. First of all, I've made this table specifically, well, I didn't make it, I found this table. And it was made specifically so that whatever angle you have here, this angle here is its complement. So 2 and 88 are complementary. 16 and 74 are complementary. So check this out. Sine of 1 degree is 0.175. Now where else on this table is the number 0.0175? If you take the complementary angle, cosine of the complementary angle is the same thing. Interesting. That means that sine of 1 degree is going to be equal to cosine of 89 degrees, because both of those are equal to 0.0175. Was that true any other place? If you look at sine of 2 degrees, that's the same thing as cosine of 88 degrees. So what we're saying here is that sine of 2 degrees is the same as cosine of 88 degrees. Interesting. That's true throughout this entire table. Sine of 3 degrees is the same as cosine of 87. Sine of 12 degrees is the same as cosine of 78. Sine of 23 degrees is the same as cosine of 67. Here's what that means. If sine and cosine are equal, the angles that you're using must be complementary. Here's an example picture-wise. This is actually the same picture. 67 degrees and 23 are complementary, which means in this picture we could say 23 degrees, and here we could say 67. If I said to you, what's cosine of 67 in this picture? You would say cosine of 67 degrees is equivalent to y over z. If I also said to you, what's sine of 23 degrees? Sine is the opposite leg over the hypotenuse. That's also y over z. Sine and cosine are the same thing because for cosine, the adjacent leg is for sine, the opposite leg. Notice how 67 and 23, those are complementary. Let's look at some examples so you can see what the heck this is actually going to help us with. Find the value of x. Here it says that sine and cosine are equal to each other. What conclusion can we draw from that? The conclusion is the two angles we're given must be complements. Therefore, x has to be 67 degrees. Number 2, sine and cosine are equal. What does that tell us? It tells us the two angles we're given must be complements. Therefore, x is 25 degrees. Now, you don't have to actually show this work. Number 3, sine and cosine are complements. Sine and cosine are equal. Therefore, the angles we're using are complements. X has to be 60 because 60 plus 30 is 90. Number 4, sine and cosine are equals. Therefore, these angles have to be complements. X has to be 30 degrees. Number 5, sine and cosine are equal. These angles then are complementary. So that means that x has to be 45 degrees. This one's a little more complicated, so we're going to show work for this. Sine and cosine are equal. Therefore, these angles are complementary. So 2x plus 1 has to equal 40. That's not true. I said one thing, I wrote something else. Since these are equal, these angles are complementary, so when you add them up, you get 90. So that would be 2x plus 41 is 90. Therefore, 2x is 49. Therefore, x is 49 over 2. Number 7. Sine and cosine are equal. Therefore, these angles are complementary angles. If you add their measures, you get 90 degrees. So that's 7x plus 30 is 90. 7x is 120. I take that back. If I subtract 30 from both sides, not add, I'm going to get 7x is 60. Therefore, x is 60 sevenths. Number 8, guess what? Sine and cosine are equal. Therefore, these angles, when you add them, you should get 90. Half x minus 5 plus the difference of x and 30 equals 90. As you've probably heard me mention before, not a big fan of fractions. So I'm going to choose to multiply every term by 2 in this equation so I don't have fractions. You do not have to do that. It's something that I choose to do. X and 2x is 3x, a minus 10 and a minus 60 is a minus 70. If I add 70 to both sides, I get 3x is 250. Divide both sides by 3, and I get x is 250 divided by 3. To sum up, if sine and cosine are equal, the angles that we're using for sine and cosine, they must be complementary. You add them up, you get 90. Please do the homework assignment. You should get it done pretty quick.